Um, Good evening to everybody. I'm sorry we were late. We had a few logistics issues, but glad to see 50 plus people here. So today's talk will be an Ask Me Anything session with PESOS alumni Atharva Raykar and Madhav Jivrajani. We had an offline event today with Sriprad, who's a fourth year student. Uh, Ritvik, could you please go to the next slide? Okay. So we had Sriprad today, who was a GSoCer in his second year, currently in fourth year right now. He did his GSoC under Unicraft, and then is now currently working in Unicraft also. He was a part of PIL, was the head of ACM, and also was a mentor in HSP. So it was a very informative session regarding GSoC. We had a lot of fun. It was very informative also. And the recording will be shared in our YouTube channel very soon. And to all of the others who couldn't make it to the offline session today, here you go. You have the online event today. Uh, you will be asking questions, but please mute yourselves, ask a question, and then you will be allowed to unmute and ask. But before that, I would request Atharva to introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone. The description says it all. As a student from the batch of 2022, I helped run the 2019 edition of PES Open Source, which has actually existed for many years before that. And I helped run it along with Madhav and a lot more people that you can find in the contributor lists of the old GitHub repository. Around this time, I did GSoC with the Git project, which I will talk about more. Um, and it was great. I um, I guess my involvement in open source is not maybe as great as it was back then, although it is still definitely very much there. I've given talks at FOSSmeet. I've worked on some open source projects in the AI tooling space. And I think the greatest part about open source is just the fact that there's very little gatekeeping and it levels the playing field in a way that's really desirable. And I think that's the emphasis I would have as well when talking about GSoC generally, which is it's one of the many ways to be able to learn to collaborate with people and do work of impact. Yeah, that's about me.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Um, could we go to the next slide, please? Yes, Madhav, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Madhav. I was in the same batch as Atharv. Atharv, and a bunch of other people, as you mentioned, helped run PES Open Source for a couple of years. It was a great experience overall, just having a community of people who want to do these things. And it doesn't even have to be for some ulterior purpose. It's just that people were having fun and they were okay having fun, which is somewhat rare to find. Um, so yeah, I started contributing to open source during my time in PS. I started with a couple of smaller things related to quantum computing, which is very off the topic, but then that sort of led to um, just a renewed interest in like this thing called open source. And then we were doing PES open source, and then after that, um, I contributed to this project called Kubernetes and some of the other surrounding projects as well. I'm a maintainer for some of those parts, and I've had a lot of fun doing that. I think it's definitely been life changing in a professional setting, and not just because you get to do cool things, but solely from the purpose of the people that you do get to interact with as you do this. And I feel like open source is just such a nice way to remind yourself that like the mentality and the thought processes you have is completely is just one of probably a million out there. So I think that was a lot of fun. And yeah, we can talk a little bit more about GSoC. I did not apply to GSoC. I helped mentor one of the projects last year. I can talk about my experiences there. Some of the things that we saw from the other side of the table, reviewing proposals, how we go about thinking about like who would be a good fit, who wouldn't be a good fit, some criteria along those lines, things like that. So we can talk a little bit more about that as well. So yeah, happy to be here and great to see PES open source revived again.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Um, okay, so today, what our agenda was to basically understand the entire process throughout their GSOC experience. We will be hearing it from, as I've said multiple times before, we'll be hearing it from a mentor perspective as well as a contributor perspective. Atharva, could you please share your GSOC experience?
Yeah, I did GSoC in the 2021 edition, which actually was a slightly weird one compared to the usual ones because this was at the peak of COVID, the second wave especially. And I think at the time they had GSoC at half the length that they usually have it with. Um, anyway, for me, it started from my interest in Git actually more than GSoC itself. I knew GSoC was a thing and I would have liked to do it because it's a great experience. But it also started from the fact that I was tinkering with Git a lot. I was doing a lot of workshops. I was studying its architecture at the time. Um, and I saw the GSoC opportunity come up, and I didn't actually prepare for it the way other people were preparing it for it at the time, where they say like around November is when you initiate contact with maintainers and stuff. Mine actually might have been a bit of a rushed proposal. Um, but I saw that they had an ideas page where, and this is true of most GSoC organizations, the project needs some things that have to be done. And so they'll just list it out. So you don't really have to rack your brain to figure out what the project needs. You can always just pick up any one of the ideas. And the idea I saw was porting some shell code to C for the Git submodule functionality. And I was actually working with submodules at the time and for one of my personal website projects, and it was a pain. And being able to work on that was great. So a lot of my proposal came from that perspective. And really, every organization, and I was looking at multiple organizations at the time, operates very differently. There's no standard way to get accepted. So Git had a process where you have to first submit a micro project, and Git actually does not work out of GitHub. You have to mail patches to a mailing list, and you have to submit a micro project, which is a really small code change that fixes a small bug here and there. Again, they have micro project ideas as well. And once you get that merged, you write a proposal for what you're going to do. And again, the proposal is based off whatever they already put up on the organization's ideas page. And this is all accessible from the website. What a mentor is usually looking for and again, this is the case with Git, but it'll be the case with every other organization, is confidence that when you start on the project, you will be able to work with them and deliver it successfully. So for Git, it looked like the micro project because that's a way for them to filter out and see whether you can work with a mailing list. You can even send that patch in the first place because that's your mode of operation. The proposal has to be written in a way that convinces them that you will be able to do the work that they needs to be done. So you um, navigate the code base, write the understanding of the work that needs to be done, give a timeline and estimate of like how you're going to do it and what's your approach, what you're going to do when you get stuck, how do you plan to communicate and catch up with your mentor, things like this. And often this instruction is given also by the organization. So if you had to think of it from a first principles way, one is just follow what the organization is telling you to do. Uh, but more importantly, you need to demonstrate that you will be able to get the work they need to get done. So that's how I got in. And then it was, I don't remember, 1 month or 2 months of just doing the work, catching up with mentors. And actually, funnily enough, I never saw or spoke to any of my mentors ever. We wholly did the project by exchanging emails on a public mailing list. Um, and that was my experience. It was great. I learned a lot. And I feel like those skills that I picked up at that time are still extremely relevant to me now, which is not only just being able to deliver work, but negotiating with all these people and stakeholders. Whoa, electricity gone. It's raining. Um, but yeah, negotiating with all these stakeholders and figuring out how to prioritize and manage your own work and communicating clearly. Um, So yeah, that was what I have to say at a high level.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your experience. Um, Madhav, could you please share your GSoC experience and how it varied from Atharva's experience, seeing as you're a mentor?
Yeah, sure. So I was a mentor last year for this project called etcd. If you don't know, it's this distributed key value store that's written in Go. Um, the experience that I had as a mentor was sort of interesting because um, since I was mentoring the last year's GSOC, you already had people that were sort of riding the AI wave that were sort of submitting proposals. And this is something that's interesting, right? Like, and I'm very sure that all of you also will want to use it in some sense. You have all of these tools that are out there which really help, boost your productivity in one way or the other. Um, but I think back then there was a lot of the lack there was a lot of lacking in like understanding how to use these tools. So what we had a issue page that we wanted people to sort of work on. So that's just like a GitHub issue with a description of what we wanted to be done. Um, what people sort of did was they pointed some AI tool to that issues page, and then they were like, write a proposal. But here's the thing. When mentors review proposals, it's immediately clear that you haven't put in effort or that you don't really understand what's going on. So I want to sort of make that clear right from the get-go. Um, like a lack of effort is very telling. It's very clear that this is something that the person hasn't maybe thought about or hasn't really put in a lot of work into, things like that. Um, but that said, we did have a few very good proposals as well, and the project sort of I think went pretty good. I'll give you a breakdown of how this goes. I think till the end of this month, you have time to write a proposal and submit it. So once the proposals sort of come in, we then see, um, we then review these proposals. I think there's a review period that GSoC gives, which is about either 15 days to a month, depending on the year. Post that, we then interview the candidates if we feel like there is a need to, like either reach out by email, have a conversation, or even get on a call, right? Depending on, this is a preference that each maintainer has. It's not really a standard thing. Um, Now, a lot of contributors that we sort of came across, one thing that they did was, uh, and this is just general advice that's out there for a good few years about GSoC, like initiate contact, have this conversation with the community, and so on and so forth. Um, it's important to understand that there is a way to just interact with open source communities as well. And what I mean by that is if you sort of DM or like direct message a maintainer or reach out personally saying, hey, I'm sort of interested in this project and I want to do GSoC with it. Can you help me out? Very well intentioned message from your side, but it doesn't really give the maintainer a lot of information to go off on. And what I mean by that is you've just put all of the effort, all of the responsibility of helping you out on someone who's already probably very busy, right? So, just as a rule of thumb in open source, try not to reach out to people personally and try not to say things like, I am interested in things XYZ. Can you help me out with it? Rather, if you are able to reach out in a public setting, like let's say the project exists on Slack, if you're able to reach out on a public channel, that gives a significantly bigger signal to any of the maintainers and contributors that this is a person who's capable of working independently. And that's someone who I don't need to hold, like I don't need to handhold, right? That's, I think, one of the first things that I would want you to remember is that. And after that, just when you want to try and ask for help, if you want to try and get some clarifying answers or just like some advice in general about how to go about things, um, I think it's a good metric to have over there is how much effort have you put in before reaching out, right? If you've sort of done some homework, you don't have to figure out the answer. That's the point of asking the question. But if you reach out saying, hey, I tried A, I tried B, I tried C, but then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. What do you think I should do? And then you've sort of pruned the search space for the maintainer to answer your question, and you're likely going to have a much better experience in that setting. And in general, I think like GSoC is a really good construct for getting into or contributing to a project long enough to be a part of it, like be a part of that community for a long period of time. Um, but it's just one of those things. Like it's just an avenue at the end of the day. So more than anything, I hope that going into this, your intent is that you want to be a part of the project after your GSoC is also done. I mean, of course, it's not like a compulsion. But in general, like if you've written some piece of code, if you've done something about the project, it's also great if you are around after the project as well to help maintain it, right? So, um, yeah, I'll stop there and we can get into more specifics depending on what questions people have.
That was really, really cool. It was nice to hear a mentor's perspective after hearing a lot of contributors' experience. Um, we will be starting with Q&A session in a few minutes, but before that, I'll be asking a few general doubts that we received even in the offline session today, so that we get cleared with the basics and that we don't have to repeat the same thing again and again. One of the first questions that somebody asked was, uh, why open source? Why GSoC? I mean, you guys did explain it. You guys did give a wonderful explanation, but again, people are not familiar with the concept of open source. And how is GSoC? It is not just a Google's product, it is something more than that. So, how would
Mhm.
you describe GSoC? It's not just a resume building tool, but as something that builds you as a person, as a developer. So, how would you categorize GSoC in that way?
Okay, I can start. So okay, so first thing, why open source, right? Um, I think everyone has different motivations to do open source. For me personally, it was um, I got to work on some of the things that I found very interesting, and it's often the case that when you sort of become a part of some open source project or open source community, the thing is very real world in some sense, at least in some sense. And for me, I was very interested in things like distributed systems. So I think Kubernetes is one of those things which is like very quintessential in that sense. So I had a fun time doing that. But even before Kubernetes, right, like we were doing PES open source and we were doing um, a lot of other clubs on campus as well, which were doing open source activities. I think a big reason that at least I personally really like it is because um, it's just it's just one of those things where you get to really work on something collaboratively, but without having the external sort of you don't really need to have a purpose for doing that. So for example, we did a lot of like very silly hacky projects. I think while we were in PES open source, which didn't really serve a purpose, or it wasn't for someone to use. It was just that we were very curious about something and we just did it. And the nice thing about that is that it really lowers the barrier for you to learn something in general, right? And this is true for like projects that student communities start or just a bunch of people who are collectively interested in something start, but it's also true for when you go and work in some of the larger open source projects. It's just that when you do that, the dynamic sort of shifts to I'm getting to collaborate with a lot of other people and they want to help me because everyone wants the project to succeed, right? And I think that in general is a very rare thing to find when you're trying to work on anything in general. So let's say you have an internship at some point, you have a job at some point. The dynamics over there are slightly different. But in open source, it's very different from the perspective of it's this shared thing that everyone is sort of trying to work towards. It's not that I am not able to get my PR in, or you are not able to get your PR in. It's that I'm sort of trying to make sure that the project flourishes in some sense. Um, so I really like that aspect of open source. And the point that you mentioned about GSoC, right? GSoC, and how do you not look at it as just like a thing that you put on your resume? Uh, it's very important to remember that. And the reason is you did GSoC, let's say, and then what, right? Now, it's significantly more fruitful for you if you look at GSoC or any open source initiative as something, as just like a way for you to engage with the project over a long period of time. Because that's when you actually get something really valuable out of it. Like you can you'll write some amount of code, you'll build some amount of features in that 12-week period of GSoC. Uh, but a lot of the benefits of open source that you get are almost never in terms of the technical work that you end up doing. It's always in terms of how you work with the community, how you interact, how you communicate, um, and the people that you get to know over a sustained period of time. So if that's your goal, then the outcome or like the benefits that you get are going to be significantly more. And more than that, you are going to be able to help something that's slightly larger than your purview of what you were doing to begin with, right? So you get to do this sort of other thing as well. And if you're lucky, you also get to then mentor someone else down the line who, like, similarly someone mentored you, you get to mentor someone else. So that was a lot, but to summarize, GSOC, please look at it as something where you can build your relationship with the community over a sustained period of time. If you look at GSOC as a resume building thing, that's fine too, but I would not recommend it because it hurts the open source project more than it benefits you. Because the open source project finally got someone who's willing to spend a lot of time with them. But if you just look at it like, okay, I'm done with this and I'm going to move on, then it of course hurts them. But you might also not get the benefits that these communities have to provide you with, just beyond GSOC, right? So, yeah.
Yep, I think that answered the question. Thank you for
Atharv, do
that.
you
Yeah.
have things to add?
Uh,
Yeah.
I have, yeah, you covered everything, but I have like two small things. One, why open source for me? The idea of open source is that everything is done in the open and the code is open. And it's worth contrasting with what it would look like without open source. Um, Without open source, I would not have looked at the Git code base. I wouldn't have understood how it works. I would have seen other people who could analyze it and understand how it works. And I would have been a stupider programmer for it. And I would have had a lot less fun. And I think fun is something that's emphasized very little these days in open source. But it's the spirit of hacker culture. Like I can just open up the code base and understand what's happening. And what's crazier is if I'm having an issue with it, I can just send a fix for that after negotiating with the maintainer in an appropriate way. And that is just really awesome. With respect to how it helps careers, it's actually not the resume thing that helped my career, especially. Actually, in fact, during placements, most of the companies didn't give a damn that I had GSOC in a relatively selective organization at the time. What actually helped is that it's a way to jump many steps to build really crucial and important skills as a programmer. And that is negotiating with other engineers and people on a technical project, structuring and managing your own work, communicating well, and building a network, right, through the mechanisms that Madhav mentioned. Those are the most important things. And like you could imagine, like looking back, I did not need GSOC at all to get any of those things. I could have still reached out to the Git maintainers. I could have still said, hey, I want to work on this project, and they would have supported me the same. Um, and that's the thing, right? Like this is just scaffolding for making this happen, and it's great for that. But really, the important thing is the process of what happens while working with the project.
Yeah, I mean, I would also like to add on to your points, Atharva. When we were asking around the campus regarding open source, many of them, uh, most of them did not know what open source was. And the people who did know what open source was, they did not fully understand the concept. They just thought that open source was just putting out your code to the world, and they were scared that other people would just steal your code. I mean, I think both of your that is a very common assumption that we faced, and one of the driving forces on why we wanted to bring back the club. Uh, I think your answers, both of your answers, clear that. Also, I would like to add that uh, it is more about the passion. Open source is more about your passion and building yourself as a developer, rather than seeing it as something that helps build your resume. So is GSoC, as they said. So yeah, please keep that in mind, everybody. I'll just go to the next question. To many of the freshers out there, when they look at huge code bases, they get extremely scared. They think that they might not be able to understand it all, or they might not be able to even understand a single file in it, let alone contribute to it. So, what would you guys suggest to all of the first years or the novices in open source who wish to contribute but have no idea how to start? I would also like to tell you guys to cover the points on documentational contributions and the actual non coding contributions too, because a few people were interested in that.
Um, okay, so there's a couple of things, right? So first of all, if you're overwhelmed by a large code base, you are not alone. That's the first thing to get out of the way. It's not that like this is something that you are facing difficulty with. It's pretty much all of us. It's still me. I'm sure to some extent it's still Atharva as well. Um, it it's hard, and there's a reason for it, right? The reason is that people have sort of been building this over many years, and you've just sort of come in, and there's probably multi-year context to build up in some sense. So don't feel too bad if you're not able to sort of jump on and right off the bat get started. Um, it's fine. Okay, I'll give you an overview of how I approach this, and I'll also give you I'll try and talk a little bit about how I'm approaching this now. So back then when I started open source, um, I'll talk about Kubernetes because that was one of the larger code bases that I had to navigate. It's I think about 5 million lines of code, some random metric like that. But by any standards, it's fairly complex. So one thing that helped me was that usually all projects they have some form of developer documentation, and that either lives in the main repo itself or there is some repo something somewhere out there that vaguely talks about what lies where in the repo. So for example, Kubernetes has some developer documentation which says folder XYZ has these things. If I want to look at this particular thing, I go and look at that. Now, that of course is not very useful when, let's say, my particular query is something like, I want to try and understand how this component broadly interacts with the rest of the project. Uh, I can't really do that by looking at developer documentation unless they explicitly address that, right? So one way for me to do it, or one thing that really helped me, was running the project itself, right? That's really important. And I think like it's very important for you to get your hands dirty, irrespective of like what piece of project you're going to do. So run the project, build it, um, do the hello world equivalent of whatever that project does. Maybe run some of the tests, and then when you run these things and build from source in general, um, and you see some log lines that you don't understand, one thing that was very helpful for me was going and then like just doing code search over the code base for particular log lines and then tracing back. So these are just very hacky, non-standard ways of doing things. But honestly, I would not do any of that today. And the reason I say that is because um, I have a few, like some of the AI tools that I use are very good at doing exploration of code bases, and I use that very heavily in my day-to-day today. So if at all you have access to some of these tools, one thing that I like doing is I point it to something that I want to understand, and I give it some context about what I want to understand, and then I ask it to draw me architecture diagrams in ASCII. It's surprisingly very good at doing that, and it's helped me a lot in trying to understand larger code bases. So the conventional advice that I have given to people in the past and the things that I have followed in the past I don't think I would do that today. And the sole reason is there's something much better at doing that. So I would highly recommend, if you do have access to these tools, make use of them for understanding larger code bases and just ask questions about the code bases as opposed to substituting your understanding of it with whatever it has told you, right? So just use this as like the tool for exploration, because I would have loved having something that I can just ask questions to, like how does component X interact with the whole thing? How was this designed internally? Things like that. Um, and I think either now or before, a general rule of thumb is like really like uh, ask why in like a while loop, in some sense. Like if you come across something, but why does it do it this way, and then just drill down on that. And that has probably like it's easiest to do that, honestly. And you'll also have a lot of fun doing that, because you're just following curiosity at the end of the day. So just relentlessly ask why about something until you figure out the answer. And it doesn't matter if the first step that you take ends up in a relevant place or no. It's just that think of it as over time you're building context about what is where in the code base. So it's just that with these AI tools, it's much faster to do that now than it was before.
Yeah, good advice. I'll only add some other things. I guess the old school way, the way I did it in 2021, was I had a pen and a blank sheet of paper, and I often the GSoC idea, for example, or like the issue you're looking at will point you to where to start looking at. Just read the code. You're not going to understand most of it. Every time you don't understand something, write down that question and just go through it. And once you have one round, you're going to have like a bazillion questions, right? Try to answer those questions by looking at the documentation or just looking at the code. Follow where that function leads. So if you have a code editor, use the jump to definition tool liberally. Um, Learn to use tools for navigating a code base generally. So, for example, your greps and your code searches. A nice tip is, and I recommend having some familiarity with this, even though your LLMs can do it for you. A nice tip to figure out how it's done is to look at LLM research agents and what commands they are running. Those are the commands we were typing normally before LLMs were doing all of that for us. Um, and yeah, keep asking why. Like you gotta almost interrogate, like you're interrogating for a crime and get the code to confess everything. And a good heuristic for if you're heading in the right direction is if you're going able to explain why a code or a decision was a certain way, like clearly to a rubber duck, you're doing a good job. Yeah, that's mostly what I have to say.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think I have a few more questions, the general doubts, but I would encourage every one of the participants to use the Q&A feature and ask your questions here. They will be asked after the general questions are done.
Hey,
Uh,
sorry, can I add like one more thing to what
yes,
I was saying
yes,
about
yes.
understanding the code?
Yep.
Um, Another thing is most projects have a sort of public channel where you can ask questions. In Git, it was this very old technology that I don't know if anyone here has heard of anymore called IRC. But nowadays there's like Slack channels and stuff, Discords. Ask on the public channel, never ask a maintainer. And public channels, anyone can answer the question, not just maintainers, right? It could be other contributors and all of that. And ask your question in a way where it shows what you've done so far, what Madhav said earlier. I tried this and this, I looked at this and that, but I still don't understand that part. And people will point you to where to look at to understand more. In general, learn to fish rather than ask for the fish. Yeah.
Okay, so funnily enough, this was my next question. So thank you for answering that. Uh, okay, coming to GSoC, how does a student choose organizations? What should they look for? I mean, looking at the code base, yes, but how do they do that? How do they approach organizations? Since there are 185 of them this year, how should they start with the whole thing?
I will go. At least for me personally, it started from just a project that I personally was invested in or care about. And obviously, um, you might not upfront have that project for you, and that's totally okay. But you can still go through the organization lists and see if like any project looks really interesting to you, right? And there's a lot of software you're using every day. So Git was one that I used a lot. Some of you might end up touching a Postgres database somewhere, and that's something you can look at. Or it could be Kubernetes, but I'll let Madhav answer how that was his project of choice. There's a lot of things you learn just by consuming uh, or like reading books or consuming talks or videos about other developers sharing things they learned. Or you might run into an interesting research paper that talks about some technology that you are excited by. Start from there and try to find an organization that aligns with that interest. It's a lot easier to do GSoC when you are personally invested in that project and you can relate it to it in some way.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree. There is, I think like the ideal scenario is if you're using a project, you are invested in it, and then you are like, I don't really like this thing in the project, and I really want to do something about it. That's the ideal scenario, right? Like that's the scenario where you already are familiar with the project, you already know how it works, things like that. Oftentimes, that's not going to be the case. So you just have to end up relying on some heuristics at the end of the day. So one heuristic is you go through the list of organizations, you just see what appeals to you, right? Just see what appeals to you, see what interests you in some sense, see what interests. If you already are familiar with it, great. But if you're not, just like I remember, um, I mean, I never applied for GSOC, but I had considered doing so during one of those years. And I remember there like CERN being an organization that was in GSOC, and I remember thinking this is so cool. Like I get to contribute to CERN, which is doing like super collider stuff. That's mind blowing. So if that's something that interests you, if there's anything that interests you, just like make a note of those things, and then just like narrow in on that funnel, right? Like go into those projects, see what's there. If it still doesn't speak to you, that's fine. You can start from step zero again. But apart from just looking at the code bases, I would say like as Atharva mentioned, it's significantly easier for you to contribute if it's something that one interests you, and then two, hopefully you're also interested in. So yeah, just that's the rubric in some sense. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we are done with the general questions. So let's dive into the Q&A. Madhav and Atharva, you guys can also see the Q&A questions. So please go through them. And if we've missed anything that's important, please feel free to address them. Uh, we'll start with one of the questions. Uh, okay, so different organizations use different tech stacks and they use different softwares in general. So, how do you choose any of them, even for contributing to the issues? How do you choose if you have a different idea? If you have a tech stack that is better, if you think that something else is, if it might be better. Uh, okay, I have two questions. Firstly, how do you choose the tech stack? And secondly, how would you let the maintainers know that this is better without sounding condescending and making your point across so that it doesn't look like AI slop.
That's I
Yeah.
really like the second question. Okay, so for the tech stack itself, I think okay, as a general rule of thumb, it's it's usually helpful to be familiar with let's say the language of development that the project is using. So it's not so of course not necessary like you can also learn it as well. That's completely fine too. But I think in general, if you can find something that you already know, for example, if you know Python already, or if you know Rust, if you know C, any of these languages, and these projects are using these languages, then that's a good fit. At least that's a potentially good fit for you to look into, because you also don't want to spend the first few weeks of your GSOC trying to learn a language or just getting familiar with how development is done. Of course, you'll need to get familiar with how the processes around it is done. So, for example, Atharva had to mail patches into Git. There are some projects which have complicated build processes and things like that. But if you don't really know Python, but the project is being developed in Python, then it's a little bit of a mismatch. That said, you can also learn it, as I said. For me personally, that was the criteria. Like I really liked Go. I really liked Go. And Kubernetes was one of the bigger Go projects out there. And it was also doing something that I really liked, distributed systems. So that was a natural sort of tendency for me to go and look into what's going on over there. What was the AI slop question? Can you repeat that?
Oh, okay. So I found another FAQ, so I'll just add both of them. Um,
Huh?
okay, firstly, if I feel that uh, the current code in that project is not good enough, and if I have a better idea, how do I approach the maintainers without sounding like I just copied it off an LLM? And also, a second question that I found out was how is the rise of LLMs being used? How is it affecting you as a mentor? And uh, why not use AI?
Okay. Athar, do you want to take
Yeah, I'll take
uh,
the first
the
question.
yeah.
Um, I like, I guess the practical answer is that if you want to suggest a better way of doing a thing to a maintainer, don't, at least not directly. And the reason for that is Chesterton's fence, which was like this. Basically, someone's put up a fence there, and you come and you ask why. Like, you should come and first ask why is the fence there rather than saying I'm going to knock down the fence. I don't see a clear reason for it to be there. Um, and very likely, as someone first contributing to a project as a drive-by person, um, it's useful to understand what's going on. And so if you see something that looks off, that, hey, this doesn't look right, why isn't this way? Ask that, right? Like, this looks wrong, why isn't this way? The two possibilities are the maintainer is going to tell you that, hey, there's like a really good historical reason for why like this is this way and why you can't do it this other way. Or they'll say, yes, that is actually broken, like there is a better way, and then they'll guide you to what that better way is, and you can get to a contribution from there. So I think have a mindset of inquiry rather than a mindset of how am I going to fix this. And I think that's generally true working with any other project. And I feel like the AI slop problem fixes itself from there, right? Because now it's not about like how you're presenting yourself. It's really like at the core of what you're trying to get to, which is understanding, building a mental model in your head for why a certain thing is a certain way. And like just talk normally, like talk like how you talk to any human, any friend, any person, right? Be polite, be authentic, and be crisp, given that maintainers are juggling and dealing with a lot of this, and so their attention is also a bit short. Also, yeah, just maybe this is like a personal thing for me. Just never send AI output to anyone ever. Like, as a person, I would much rather read some grammatically rough but very like real uh, communication than reading very polished, bullet pointed AI written content. And I can tell, maintainers can tell because they're receiving a lot of AI output all the time.
Yeah, I think I agree with most of that. I think um, it's so. I think part of the question that you also mentioned was why not use AI? I would say use it. I would 100% say use it. The reason is that it can really, really enhance your experience as a contributor. Like previously, we've had to do all of these things where we had to figure out a large code base, we've had to figure out how builds work, dependency issues, things like that. But like, it doesn't need to be painful, right? Like, if you can make it not painful using these AI tools, please do it, right? And here's the nuance though. You have to try and use it in a way that really, really improves the experience for both you and the project as well. What do I mean by this? There's a couple of things, right? The first thing is that use AI in your purview. So what I mean by that is if you want to try and explore a code base, use it to do that. Ask questions about the code base. The thing Atharva mentioned about like you reading the code, having some questions, ask those questions to these AI tools. They're great at that. And I do this on a very, very regular basis, right? The second thing is that honestly, all open source projects and communities are trying to figure out how to deal with this AI generated code that people are just submitting right off the bat. No one has an answer yet, but a general rule of thumb that I have seen in the projects that I'm involved with, um, and this is something that if you keep in mind can do you a lot of good, is that if you are able to use these AI tools, uh, after knowing what a contribution should entail, then it's going to be significantly easier for you to, or it's going to be a significantly better contribution. Now, what I mean by this is, I'll take two scenarios. The first scenario is that you have, let's say, a GitHub issue that's detailing what you need to do and what needs to be fixed. One approach to this is you taking an AI tool, giving it the GitHub issue, and saying, generate a patch for me, generate a PR for me. That's one way to do it. The second way to do it is you pointing the AI tool to the GitHub issue and saying, help me understand what the problem here is. And then once you have an understanding of the problem, saying, okay, where is this part of the code that is buggy? Where is that part of the code that needs to be that needs a test added? All of these things. And then you telling the AI tool, okay, can you go to this part, fix this? Can you go to this part, add this test? That's the second scenario. Now, I don't know what you're thinking right now, but the second scenario is probably a significantly better contribution than the first one. And the reason I say this is not just because you've put in the effort, but also because maintainers can really, really tell. They can really, really tell that this is something that's purely AI. Please use AI. I'm not saying don't, but use it in ways that enhance your ability to contribute, right? So figure out what difficulties you are having as an individual in contributing. So that can be things like understanding a tech stack, that can be things like understanding a code base, so on and so forth. And then use AI to mitigate those difficulties as opposed to replace them altogether, right? So um, the summary of this is maintainers can very easily tell what is AI and what isn't. So if you've put in the effort, even if you're using AI for like, let's say, polishing some writing thing that you're very insecure about, that fine, but you can still tell that this person has actually put in the work because what you end up outputting will have those specifics that would be there only if you've sort of put in that effort. So definitely use AI. Please don't not do it. In fact, I think you will also have a much better learning experience if you do it. But I hope you sort of figure out what's right for you. I don't think I have guidelines in general about how to do these things because I don't think it varies a lot person to person as well. But I hope you figure out what's right for you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Um, Also, another question that we got was um, just a second. Yeah, so okay, so I figure out an organization and I look at their code base. I look at everything. But now, when it's time for me to submit my proposal, how would how should I make my proposal so that it stands out from everybody else? I mean, yeah, you as a maintainer, you do get to know about AI. I mean, you can figure out if it's AI or not. But how does a person who has worked days and weeks on projects, how do they make sure that their projects stand out? And also another question, what kind of prerequisites do organizations uh, wish to see in their contributors proposals?
I
Okay.
think
Yeah, Atharva, go
sorry,
first. Go ahead.
I was just saying Madhav is the better person to answer this, but I'll preface it with one thing because this came up in the previous question as well, which is that especially as a first-time contributor new to this, it's very easy to misjudge what maintainers find important and what they value. Sometimes people often think my code needs to be perfect, or like my grammar or my presentation of it needs to be excellent. But actually, what like maintainers look for is what is the effort? How much inquiry have you done? Um, how are you able to think through things? How communicative and responsive are you? Right? Those things matter more. Um, and it'll matter here as well. But yeah, I'll let Madhav answer the rest of it.
No, I fully agree. Like, so for the project that I had mentored last year, um, you'll get a lot of proposals that look very similar, and that can be for a multiple like for multiple reasons. It can be because everyone sort of arrives at the same conclusion, or it can be that everyone uses the same AI tools. One of them is better than the other, but the people that really stand out are the people who don't necessarily have the best proposals, like written proposals, but they're people who've shown up in the community, right? Like they've joined meetings of the project. Like let's say if your project that you're looking into conducts weekly meetings or some cadence of meetings, these people have shown up to these meetings. They've asked questions. They've consistently shown up on these forums as well, like Slack, IRC, Discord, whatever it may be. Um, so these are people that we already have a very, very high signal of. Uh, yeah, exactly. Like show genuine interest, right? Like these are people that we already have very, very high opinions of. So it doesn't really matter if the proposal is not as good as some of the others in terms of, let's say, it's not very well polished or it's not as detailed, but we know that this person is showing up. They've already incorporated themselves in the community. And one of the things that mentors have to do, apart from helping the person achieve the technical aspect of the project, is that they have to also help the person get into and get used to the community, right? That's one of the uh, that's a big responsibility for the mentor, which is they have to sort of bring the person into the community, make sure that they flourish in the community, and so on. But if the mentor is already seeing that this person is in the community already, knows how to interact with it, it's a very, very big plus, I would say. So instead of spending time on figuring out how your proposal stands out, I would say spend some time getting used to the community, showing interest, asking curious questions. And that, of course, as a byproduct, your proposal will also be good for that. Um, and I think, yeah, just like if you're someone who shows up in the community, you already have like your opinion, the mentor's opinion of you is already higher than most people's. So yeah, just show up.
This is a personal question, but there are multiple people who apply for this certain organization for this issue. So even if I am active in the community, do you as a mentor look at there'll be multiple other people who are also active in the community, and this is internationally. So how, do you
Mhm.
as a mentor check everybody individually if they were active in the community, or how does that work?
So it's rare that like, or at least we didn't do this thing. We didn't do the whole, okay, let's check if this person was active in the community. It was more along the lines of, um, if I've interacted with this person over a few weeks, I know that this person is like, I don't need to go check. Like, I know that this person has been helping out. And oftentimes, the person who ends up helping out quite a lot is they don't just contribute to the discussions related to that project. There's someone who's used the project, has come up, or let's say they faced some difficulties while they were setting up the project, or like some documentation that was out of date or whatever, and they've just been like, yeah, this needs fixing, let me go fix it. I think that's what really stands out. There's going to be, you're right in that there's going to be multiple people internationally that are showing up in the community and interacting with the community. But there's a very big difference between someone who's showing up and saying or asking questions about that particular GSoC project versus you who's shown up, used the project, uh, found some places that aren't as good or need some fixing up. Like the best example is documentation is almost always stale in some sense. So if you're able to figure out like, okay, this needs updating and I go update it without there being like an issue for you to go do, I think that really sends a very strong signal because there's always work to do in the community. There's always a lot of things that need to be fixed. It's just what are the most burning things that contributors are going to fix first because resources are going to be limited. So if you're someone who can just be like, yeah, don't worry, I can take these smaller things off your plate right off the bat, that sends a very strong signal. And I think that's the idea with these micro projects with Git that even Athar was talking about. Right. So yeah, that's the difference mostly. I see a comment, community mentors, and particularly for my project, there are not many people contributing, so I don't have much room to contribute other than my mini project and my proposal. Um, I think yeah, that's fine. Again, it doesn't really have to be something that even if they don't have a lot of contributors, that's completely fine too. And I'm not saying like you have to try and find something to fix. As long as you're showing up with genuine interest, um, that will come across. Like genuine interest will always differentiate itself from someone who's doing it just because they have to ask questions about GSoC. Like it's very clear to mentors that this is what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, genuine interest is an unfakeable signal. Um, Also, regarding there being many competing proposals, if you have just shown up at that point and the maintainers know you, even if they reject your proposal, right? Like I've seen many organizations still accommodate that person somehow because like you don't have to even wait till GSoC to make a contribution, or you don't have to only necessarily do it within the GSoC system. Some organizations actually have their own like programs or stipends, or even if they don't, they are willing to mentor and let you contribute. And that is good. That is the part that's actually valuable to your career. Um, you can still say like uh, I converted the submodule functionality from shell to C in Git, on your resume, even if you don't mention GSoC. And that is what people are looking for essentially. Proof of work that you have done something useful and that you can work well with people in a project of high quality. And you will get those skills. So, yeah, don't necessarily even be so attached to the outcome of accept or reject. Involve yourself in the community.
Yeah, I fully agree. Like I hadn't done GSoC or any of the other open source mentorship programs, and I think I had a great experience just because of that. And it's done a lot for me personally. So yeah, okay. Let me look at the Q&A.
Also, one of the questions are that if uh, okay, so you said that you have IRCs. I mean, the organizations have places where the people chat. But what if that's inactive? Is there a case where when if the I mean, if the organization's meetups are inactive, how uh, would you suggest us going to the maintainers directly and approaching them, or how would you approach that situation if you can't contribute to the discussions in the organization?
Honestly, if a project is one which where let's say it does not have a public place to discuss something, um, that's not much of an open source project. And if that's in GSoC, that's probably a mistake, and you might not want to be a part of that project. Um, Now, the flip side of this is that if you really you at in your soul you really want to do GSoC, then that's a project you can probably get into because like not a lot of people are going to be applying to that. But in general, I don't think that's much of an open source project to begin with. So just holistically speaking, for your own growth, it's better if you try and find some place that has an active discussion forum. And the other side of it is, let's say they do have a public forum, but like no one's responding there or it's not very active. There can be a few reasons for this. One good way to sort of go about this is that you post something in public, you wait a couple of days, you don't hear back. What you do then is I think that's one of the cases where it's permissible to sort of ping a maintainer and be like, hey, I'm not sure if I'm in the right place, but I had posted this question. Can you please redirect me to a right forum to where I can get this answered? That's a good way to go about it, right? Because the maintainer will either respond to you directly or tell you a better place to ask, right? I think that's a good balance to have. Yeah.
And also one of the other questions were, as a maintainer, as a mentor, what do you look for first in a proposal? I mean, apart from the obvious interest, do you,
Mhm.
if a person just has projects related to your domain, or if you have a person who just has PRs related to your domain, uh, what do you prioritize there? Do you prioritize PRs? Do you prioritize projects or interests? Or what is your thought process as a mentor?
I think the first thing that I would, okay, apart from this, the interest part as well, like I think the first thing when I read the proposal is I really need to see that the person has understood what needs to be done. That's the first thing. Of course, the technical details that they might get wrong, that's fine. But the person needs to understand what needs to be done. I saw a lot of proposals where people didn't really understand the issue and what needed to be implemented. So that's the first thing. Like the first thing is like just ability to understand what needs to be done. The second thing is if you have some technical expertise, not expertise, but like if you have some technical understanding of that domain in general. So, for example, with the project that I was mentoring called HCD, at the core, it's a distributed key value store. So there are some problems in databases, there are some problems in consensus algorithms, so things like that. If a person has like some experience working on these sort of technologies, then it's a big um, then it's at least a signal for me that this is someone who will be capable of handling these tasks. And then after that, the last thing that I look for is like, I don't really care if you have PRs or no, as long as you've shown up. As we've already mentioned this, but when it comes to PRs, like if you have PRs, great. But that's still not a very strong indicator in by any way, shape, or form. Like I would highly recommend you try it out. Uh, but it's not a proxy for anything. I think like it's just like a plus point, I would say. And then finally, I think I personally have prioritized and preferred candidates who also have some familiarity with the tech stack. So, for example, HCD was written in Go. So, if the person has some familiarity with like Go programming in general and like concurrency and things like that specific to Go, I would prefer that solely because you don't have to spend a week or 2 weeks getting yourself up and running with the language itself, and you can just like actually start working on the project, right? So, this is just some of the criteria.
Atharva, do you have anything to add on to that?
Not really. Madhav nailed it.
Okay, all right. One of the next questions is, okay, Atharva, you mentioned that you could have contributed to Git just as much even without GSoC, and it was just a channel for you. Uh, how different? The question says, how different is contacting a maintainer directly, and what is the difference between that and contacting a maintainer through GSoC? Like, I mean, GSoC, what is the novelty of GSoC there, except for it just being a channel for you?
Yeah, uh, one to clarify, don't contact the maintainer directly one-on-one, except for the like extreme circumstances that Madhav talked about earlier. There's always a public place. There's the issues page. There's always going to be an IRC, Slack channel, Discord, something where people and the maintainers themselves are often remote in different time zones. They need a place to discuss the project, and it's usually one of those. So that's the point where you contact, and the reason why you want or why everyone wants it that way is also that when you post a question and that question is answered, it benefits everyone who is able to see that channel, and that's one of the points of like open source. Um, oh yeah, so on to the question, which is how does it look different when it's GSoC versus when you just approach the project and do it? There is not much difference except that Google themselves want to support and ensure that open source communities thrive and are doing well. And so they pay a stipend to contributors. I don't know if the organizations get anything. I'm not too familiar with that side. But organizations get some of their work done. So it's just adding a bit of incentive to bring new people into open source. But really, the rest of it looks quite similar. GSoC has some more formal things where you like submit your proposal to the GSoC website. It is logged and recorded, and they mark it as whether you made it through and or you didn't. Um, and you get paid, which is nice. But other than that, it roughly looks really the same because ultimately what you're doing is contributing to an open source project. So yeah, GSoC's uh, yeah, GSoC is really for that. It's an incentive system to make sure open source continues thriving. Madhav, do you have any other perspective?
No, I think I fully agree. Like, ideally, you reaching out to a maintainer for GSoC versus not for GSoC should not have a difference. Like, that's the ideal scenario. If you're able to just reach out in the general sense, uh, like, I would say like GSoC is just like a byproduct. And okay, I want to sort of preface all of this, like not preface, but like I want to clarify all of this. Like we've said a lot of things around uh, GSoC as like not just as a resume thing or GSoC as um, like you showing genuine interest and things like that. And it might seem like it's sort of very hand wavy or it's easier to say these things than do it. But the reason that we're really stressing on this is that you as an individual outside of GSoC, the potential that you can have for growth or just in general your experience with open source is 100% going to be significantly better if you just somehow are able to treat these open source programs like GSoC as a byproduct of your contributions. If you're able to do that, then like the experience you're going to have is significantly better, right? So that's the whole reason we're really stressing on this. And it's of course easier to say these things now than when we were also in your position and in your shoes. Like we also felt the same exact things. But I guess that's the benefit of hindsight, right? Like hopefully you can take something or you can remember some of this. None of this is going to be immediately useful to you right after you cut this call, but hopefully it stays with you in the long run enough that you have a good enough experience. Okay.
Also, Madhav is being one kind of humble as usual. He was contributing to Kubernetes and he got into the community just like through this, right? Like without GSoC. So there's like an
Oh
example
wow,
right.
that's awesome. Oh my god.
Yeah. Okay. So we can look at the next Q&A. Do you have any specific one you want to ask, or should we just look at?
Yes. Yeah, I have a question. People do tell everybody to just focus on writing a proposal for just one project and giving it your all. But one of the people here, they ask if you've been contributing to two issues in the same organization or two projects under the same org, then do you prefer do you prefer the contributor to put up a proposal for both of them, or would you rather they focus only on one of them and give it their all only for that one uh, project?
I think this is one of those things where the mentor tells you what to do. So, for example, if I was interacting with a contributor who was contributing to two things, depending on how they were doing in either of those things, or based on my view of the project and what it needs next, um, I would honestly just I would guide the co- I would tell this person to be like, hey, we probably need more help on this issue, so why don't you write a proposal solely catered to this? Or if I feel like there's enough help already, and this person can probably try and submit the proposal for both, the mentor will probably tell you, is what I'm trying to say. Like the maintainer or the mentor that you're working with in the project will probably tell you what to do in terms of submitting for one, submitting for the other, or both. And if they don't tell you, you can ask. Like, please ask. That's fine. This is one of those things where it's okay to privately ask. And the reason it's okay to privately ask is because it's established that you've done the work because you're already contributing. Right? So it's established that you've already been doing these XYZ things in the community. So that's one of the reasons where it's okay to sort of reach out and ask, like, hey, I'm looking to submit a proposal. Do you think I should submit for one? Or do you think I should submit for two? Or do you think I should submit for both of them? So just ask if they don't tell you. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we are done with the general questions, but there are a few personal specific questions that um, I would ask you both to please go through those and answer them too.
Okay, let me open the Q&A tab. Um,
I think all of the Q&As marked unanswered are the personal specific ones.
okay, I see one anonymous question about tech stacks. I think they are saying something about um, projects using different tech stacks and then also switching between them quite frequently. Um, the answer there is if the question is about like how do you deal with varying tech stacks in general, I think the answer there is like if a project is using something specific, you have to sort of try and familiarize yourself with that. But if the question is like how do I decide what to use while I am contributing, then that's something that a maintainer can help you with. The maintainer can tell you why don't you use this over that, and the reasons for this are X, Y, Z. So they'll probably tell you if that's something that you're worried about. Okay. Um, okay. I'm a first year trying to. Sorry, Athar, go on.
Yeah, I'll add some perspective about like having to deal with various tech stacks, or if the project you are genuinely interested in happens to have some piece of tech that you're not familiar with. The implied thing throughout this whole process and the call and everything we're describing is have good fundamentals, have interest in programming, and learn things on the side. And when you have good, strong fundamentals and good first principles thinking, you are able to deal with varying tech stacks because fundamentally speaking, a lot of patterns show up everywhere. Um, so if you're good at React, you will be able to deal with a different state management framework on the front end. In my case, I did not know shell scripting, especially not the kind of advanced shell scripting Git was doing, even at the time submitting the proposal. And I just took aside some time to learn it, and it was fine because I worked with other languages before and I could pick up this one as well, and it was fun. So that's my input on that.
Yeah. Also, by the way, if anyone wants to like unmute and ask any of these questions, please do that as well. We can, of course, we are looking at the Q&A thing, but like if you feel comfortable just like unmuting and asking some of your questions, please feel free to do that. Uh, okay.
I see a few questions, like one question about is it easy to get into the organization or not? I don't know. It depends on the organization and how well you fit into it. But there is like some talk about like some organizations are easy, some are hard. I think that doesn't matter because if you're a good fit for a particular organization, you're a good fit. Like I remember many people were like saying or considering that Git is a hard organization, but it's not hard for a person that is interested genuinely in Git and has spent time on the side just reading how its internals work for fun. So don't like go by any third party random opinions on this. Follow your own compass.
Okay. 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 What's the next one? What might lead to? Okay, so there are some questions about like constraints about. So someone's asking a question about um, adding features to a data set, but then that would require retraining a model. As a mentor, would it be something that would be rejected? Honestly, that is a really good question. I, I would say try and figure out what the project's constraints are, and these constraints are always discussed very publicly, by the way. So if you're able to sort of figure out if the organization that you want to help, um, they have some constraints regarding like not being able to provide compute resources for training some small scale model or whatever it may be, uh, then try and work with the maintainer about like, hey, I want to try and submit this proposal, but my idea is adding these things. Is that feasible for a GSoC project? Ask this in some public channel, and then you'll get like a very direct uh, piece of feedback regarding this. That's a great question. I think you should like make sure that that gets answered from the maintainer itself. And it's also a good excuse for you to interact with the maintainer. So if you want to look at it that way. Um,
Kushal has a nice question, and I'd like to take that one, which is, do I have any suggestions as to which type of projects to start contributing, and what was the driving factor? One part of it is what I've said earlier, which is just have interest in that project and all of that. But I think there's another interesting related question to this, which is, how do you build up to that big GSoC proposal? I didn't just show up one day where I proposed a 6 weeks project with a timeline and like, oh, I knew what to do. A lot of my open source journey started with really, really small issues and changes. Sometimes it was just opening issues to fix documentation. Often documentation is one of these things that are like really broken. Obviously, now I think it may not be as broken because there's like a lot of AI tools automating this kind of work. But there's always some small issue somewhere that's too low priority for the core maintainers to deal with or put their attention into. And that is where you can get like the smallest possible experience that's still useful. And from there, like one is you learn the mechanics of what making a contribution is, and you can build up from there. So by the time I submitted my GSoC proposal, I had made many smaller contributions of increasing intensity across many other projects that I also was just using or was interested in some capacity. So that's how you would get there.
and honestly, I feel like having like we did a bunch of open source projects in PES open source, and I feel like that's a great like stepping stone in general to contributing. I think and we had a lot of fun with those projects. So I mean, I'm sure the club has ideas and intent to do stuff like that, but I would highly recommend doing it if you have some time. I see your hand up. Who's this person?
Yeah, Hemant, could you please ask your question now?
Yeah, hello. So I just had a question because I'm trying to apply for GSoC this year, and even before actually making my proposal, it has completely changed my view on contributing to open source. So I'd like to ask how much of an impact that like GSoC made on your perspective to contributing to open source.
Acha, go for it. I haven't done this also.
Oh yeah, right. Um, I guess I feel like GSoC was just doing the thing I already enjoyed doing at that point. So it wasn't more like I did this thing and my life changed. It was more like I grew into the life I wanted here, right? Um, and it's great. It's one thing that I said earlier, and I would like to emphasize again, is it teaches you how to work in the real world with really great people. Once you get into the workforce, you realize from within the structures of companies and many like big bureaucratic companies, it's really hard to get that opportunity where you're working with people who are like really world class and really amazing. And this is like a straight shot to working with the best people very early on. And that is very rewarding. You also build a network with people, and that always helps you later. So that has been the biggest contribution, which is it just taught me how to work very effectively, and it accelerated my learning in a way that nothing else could have.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you for that. Because like this year when I was going through a few of the well organizations, I came across OpenVINO, which is a tool that I use as well because I don't really have a dedicated CPU, and I thought, why not just start somewhere, like use GSoC as an excuse. And by the time I've actually gotten through the documentation, started trying to contribute to it, it just didn't matter that whether I got into GSoC or not. It just felt like something that I'd like to work on, and that felt like the true purpose of having working on open source, like having a more hands-on approach.
Full. I love that. That's great. I hope you have a really fruitful experience. That sounds really fun too. Yeah. I think someone else had their Monal.
Monal, could you please ask your question now?
Yeah, so hi Madhav and Atharva. I've been contributing this to this org for the past 2 months, and in the meetings, the maintainers have said that they're like a little busy coming up with the project ideas and stuff, so they're not like able to review. And there's like 10 days left for us to like send the proposal, like about 10 days. So is it a like let's say I just continue contributing till the contributors are finally announced. So, what do you think I should do in that time period that can, like, let's say, improve my chances of getting recognized by the maintainers? Because so far I've just been contributing and it's like the PRs are just there.
Oh, so okay. I see. So you're saying you've been contributing, but the PRs is open, like they haven't really gotten around to it. Is that
Yes.
okay? Okay. I think if that's the case, then um, I think that that's a good opportunity for you to show that you can help push these PRs in. And the maintainers are right in that, like they don't have time. It's true for most maintainers, unfortunately. But let's say that I'm assuming you, since you said PRs plural, you have a few of them. I would say pick like the smallest, like the easiest one that you think is just like is very easy to get in, and then sort of work or with the maintainers just for that one thing, if it's possible. But if they're just outright refusing to help in general, about the by the way, are these PRs like issues that the product already had,
Yes,
or
they are linked to issues.
okay, if that's the case, then yeah, I would really suggest like reaching out to them again, and being, hey, can someone help take a look at this one PR? It doesn't have to be a multitude of them. Just start with that one thing, and if you're able to get that much, then it's an excuse for you to show that, or not even show, but it's an excuse for you to like figure out how to get something in while everyone else is anyway busy, right? It's That's also like a really good like thing to learn overall. So if you're able to do that, great. If not, the maintainers know you. They've seen sorry, they've seen the work that you've done. So um, if you're not able to do that, that's fine too. But if you still want to, just pick that one small thing and see if you can work towards that. Yeah.
I
Does that
think
help, Monal? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
yes. Sorry. Yeah, I think we have covered all of the questions so far. Um, there are a few people who would like to reach out to you both personally. So where could they do that?
I think let me give you my email because I'm really not very responsive on WhatsApp. Um, if you can
Same.
reach out on email, that'd be great. I'm very responsive in general.
Oh yeah,
So
also we have a community. So if you guys put out your doubts there, there will be other people also, other seniors also who will be able to help you. So
Yeah, I agree. Like you can take some of our advice on how do you communicate with maintainers and apply it here as well. I will check out the Discord from time to time, and I guess if you tag me on that public Discord, I'll get notified or something. So
Yes, we'll do that.
prefer that. And if there's like some information that's like very like personal that you don't want to divulge in a public forum, then you can reach out to us on these email IDs.
I think we have covered all of the Q&As today, as well as the general questions. I think that would be the end of this AMA. Thank you so much, Atharva and Madhav, for agreeing to this and being so helpful regarding the whole process of GSoC and open source in general. Do you guys have anything to add at the end? You have anything to say to everybody here, all the 20 people in total who are here?
I think, no, just like thanks for having us. And I hope it was helpful for anyone who was listening. And again, I feel like these sort of AMAs and this sort of advice, like it ends up being very subjective in general. It may vary for you. So I hope you still find what works for you. And again, this is not going to be helpful for you right after you cut this call, but hopefully it sticks with you in the long run. So yeah, good luck. I hope things work out.
Atharva, do you have anything to add on?
No, don't put out slop, live, laugh, love. Yeah.
Okay. Again, I
Put that on the
thank.
next PESOS t-shirts. Nice.
Yeah, this was very fun for us, and as well as for all of the people attending this. Thank you so much. And also both of them are there in the community. So if you guys have any doubts, any queries, please text them there or through mail. Yeah, I hope this session was very informative to everybody here. We have a lot more planned for. We have a lot more planned in general and also in particular. So please keep an eye out on the club. We are very promising. We promise you that we'll improve your. I don't know. We'll improve you as a developer. At least we hope to do that. So, that has been the aim of PESOS since 2011. So we just hope to carry that forward. Thank you so much for everybody who attended and sticked out until the end. And also another thing that we had to tell from our club side is that we're opening recruitments very soon. So please get ready with all of your projects, with all of your open source software knowledge, anything and everything. We have a varied panel of mentors that we have in the club who have done open source work from software to hardware. You have ECE, we also have quantum, we have biotech people, we have mentors with all the interests, and we hope to cover every one of your interests also. So please let us know if you're interested in any of those. We will also be sending a list of all the mentors and their accolades so that you can get to know them, stalk their GitHubs a little, and then you can reach out to them if you have any doubts, or if you wish to do any of the projects under them. And also reach out to alumni. They're super cool, super friendly. And yeah, thank you so much for coming, everybody. This was our first event successfully done after 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
We had 2 events today. Thank you. It was the fruitful. It was a fruitful event after months of slogging just to revive the club. So glad the whole day went well. We will be sending out the offline recording as well as this meeting's recording on our YouTube channel. So please keep an eye out for that. And also, we have previous recordings where Atharva and Madhav and I think Samyak also, all of you all talked about Git workflow. You talked about a lot of other stuff in there. So do check out those also. Very interesting stuff. So yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. We had to go through all of your videos and get to know you both even before contacting you. So
I'm sorry. But okay, this was great. Thank you so much for having us, and good luck. Hopefully, we'll
Yeah,
see
all
you
the
soon.
best, all of you.
Yes, thank you so much. Good night.
Bye bye.